Okay, so it's been a few days and it's about time I talked about the Star Trek Discovery cancellation. So yeah, as we all know, it's now ending after season 5, despite the fact in some circles that these rumours have been around for quite a few years that the next season was going to be the last season of Discovery. Season 5 is now confirmed, so Disco is over. It was also announced that the season is getting pushed back until 2024 as well. This probably means it's given them time to do some rewrites, maybe even some reshoots to tie up some ends, because man, there are some loose ends that this show is going to have to wrap up in the last season. So, there's a few things that I want to talk about regarding this news and the show itself. I know Star Trek Discovery isn't everyone's favourite, but it is some people, so I'm going to try and respect that. But yeah, a lot of people won't be shocked, and let's be honest, some are going to be overjoyed that this show's ending. I do think it's a bit odd that it's been announced now when they've just announced that the show isn't going to come back for almost another year. So, my first question is, why announce it so far in advance? Well, first of all, filming's wrapped, the cast are out of their contracts and they're free to move on to other jobs, so no doubt you would see people like Doug Jones, Sonequa Martin Green and others agreeing to do other TV shows, films, theatre, that sort of thing. You'd be like, well, if they're doing a movie for 6 months, they can't be doing the next season of Discovery. So it's just to get it out there and get it ahead of what people would put together eventually anyway. Also, it might be ending because maybe the cast only signed up for an initial 5-year contract. So what that would mean is once they're out of contract, they're free to negotiate for higher rates of pay. And for production companies and channels and streamers, this is where it gets a bit tricky, because if you look at the last season of Game of Thrones, pretty much all of the main 4, 5 or 6 cast members were on at least about $1 million each now. Discovery's not Game of Thrones, but that's an example. It happens all the time in TV shows. Actors are out of contract and a show's been successful, and quite rightly they want more money, but the production is like, no, if we give you more money then we can't put money into the show. So, one of those things. Now, I know that people say it could have gone for 7 seasons, and probably could have, but Discovery's been a wild ride. From the mirror universe to the far-flung future, this show has done a lot. And I don't hate this show, I just want to get it out of the way. I think that Discovery was a huge missed opportunity and a disappointment, but I certainly don't hate it. But what it has done, I think it's fair to say that it's never really got it right. The last 2 seasons have suffered from bad writing and terrible pacing issues throughout. So I've got to ask myself, was it cancelled, or did they just decide that they didn't want to make any more if maybe cost wasn't that much of a factor? But I think that money here probably is an overriding factor, because no streaming service at the moment is really making that much money. And with 5 Star Trek shows on the air, of course you're going to chop the oldest if you have to. Strange New Worlds hasn't had its second season, and Picard's about to wrap up its final one. That means after 2024, at the moment, we're only going to have 1 live-action Star Trek show, plus Lower Decks and Prodigy. And Discovery's never been a huge universal hit. I know that a lot of people sort of think that it has been, but if you live outside the United States, it's been an absolute nightmare to try and watch this show from about season 3 onwards. It gets put on streaming services, it gets taken off without any sort of announcement. You've got no idea where you're going to watch it. I mean, the last season, I think they pulled all of Discovery season 1 to 3 off Netflix 2 days before the premiere of Discovery Season 4. So yeah, just when your fans want to sit down and do a rewatch and a catch-up, that's taken away from them, and Paramount Plus hadn't launched in the UK at that time. So there's pretty much no way to watch Star Trek for a while, or at least Discovery. And there's been a lot going on in front of and behind the camera. I think that's been known about Discovery from Season 1, because the first showrunner quit before the first episode even aired. And it's had a lot of other problems as well. I say the dialogue and the writing, it's not very Trek dialogue in the way that the crew speak to each other. It's all like they're all pals, just joking about working in a bar rather than being on a science/military vessel in deep space. There's not that sort of respect and reverence that the other Star Trek shows have had. And speaking about the way that the crew talks to each other than the main characters, Detmer, Washington and the rest, we've not had any significant backstory on them. I mean, they've kind of started to write them out in the last season. And with the final season to go, I don't think Nielsen's going to get her moment to shine, let's just put it that way. But yeah, a list of showrunners and a list of producers longer than the crew of the Enterprises. I would say it's sort of introduced what's known as trauma trek speeches. They use emotion instead of exploration and focus on the one character from the start was a pretty much bad idea. Because, let's be honest, that's why Star Trek works, is you watch the crew, not the individual. Now, Discovery has remedied that in season 3 and 4 and taken the focus off Michael, and I do like Michael a lot more now that she's in charge, and we're getting a bit more room with the rest of the characters in the world, but focusing on the one character for the first 2 seasons was a huge mistake, and it denied an opportunity to tell stories that normal Trek wouldn't necessarily struggle with. Also, if you think I'm just hard and beating up Michael Burnham about this, Star Trek Picard also learned the same lesson in that the first 2 seasons were focused on Picard, and then they pulled out the Next Generation crew for the third one to make it work a little bit better and get it back to what people know. So no, I'm not just hating on Michael and Discovery. I think focusing on one character is a bad idea for any Star Trek show, regardless of who it is, where they're from, all that stuff. Also, another problem Discovery had from the start was being a prequel set 10 years before the original show, stuck in canon hell, tied to events that we knew that were going to happen. So when they did try and change anything, even if it was a little thing, it was always a huge change. So, for example, Section 31 being completely out in the open and everyone knows what it is, didn't make sense. Michael being Spock's sister was just such a hardcore mistake, because after season 2 they pretty much dropped all that. Also, the spore drive tech, we knew it hadn't been brought up in any of the other shows that we'd watched in canon, so they had to explain that away from the start and it was hanging over them. And also, relying too much on old Trek, at the end of season 1 they wheeled out the Enterprise, Pike and Spock. And while season 2 was kind of better, it was just relying on Star Trek that we'd already seen and letting us know the events that we'd already seen were going to happen. Also, I mentioned earlier on in the video, with 5 Star Trek shows on its streaming service at the moment, Paramount had a lot riding on this franchise. And I honestly do think behind Yellowstone, Star Trek is probably one of the biggest assets that Paramount has. But maybe pouring all the money and time and production into these shows hasn't paid off as well as they would have liked in terms of subscribers. Because I honestly haven't heard anyone that says they're going to sign up to Paramount Plus just to watch Star Trek. It's they need to do it, not they want to do it. But yeah, these are just some thoughts. I'm going to do a deeper video into Star Trek Discovery once it gets closer to the next season coming up. It might not be the end of this universe, because Alex Kurtzman did hint in the announcement that he's working on a potential Starfleet Academy spin-off show. So they'll probably use Tilly to set that up. I don't think Mary Wiseman will be a lead actor in that somehow. The Starfleet Academy show, the rumours have been around about this going all the way back to the 70s and 80s. It's just they didn't really try the format out, and to be honest, I don't think it's going to work. It'll be that young adult Trek, and the whole young adult sci-fi scene kind of died a death about 5 or 10 years ago, so they might be a little bit late for that. But I would like to see a show that continues the continuity from Discovery. I've got a few ideas in what it's going to be. But as I said, that's for another video, and as always, these are just some of my thoughts. So I want to know what you think of Star Trek Discovery and the cancellation. Let me know in the comments below. And remember guys, be respectful. It might not be your favourite Star Trek. That's okay, but it's okay for others to like the show as well. And if you've made it this far, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it already. My name's Al, thanks for watching.